Rock 100.5, I'm Axel. We are remembering the legend Eddie Van Halen, who lost his battle with cancer today at the age of 65. It's a somber day. It's a sad day for any rock fan. And that's why I have a comedian on the phone, so he can make us all laugh. Ain't that right, Craig Gass?
Oh, man. You didn't tell me I had to make people laugh. Oh,
I'm joking. God. I'm joking. I've talked about you. We've been doing this. Craig Gass, a lot of people know, national comedian. You might know him from the Gene Simmons Show. He is the guy that does Gene Simmons' voice so well that he was on Gene Simmons' show. He was on The Roast. But I've been talking about this all night. You've got the greatest Van Halen story as well. So, first of all, how are you doing out there in L.A.?
Doing okay, man. It's been a weird day today because I've been aware that Eddie wasn't doing well and trying to reach out to him to check in on him and hadn't talked to him in a while. But I just found out today that apparently he wasn't talking to anybody this year. He was not answering his phone for anyone because of his health. So when the news hit, it was a gut punch.
Obviously, like any kid growing up in the 80s, you were a Van Halen fan, but then you got intertwined in the inner circle. So tell that story, because it's such a great story.
Yeah, I'm from New York, and I actually spent my formative years in Tucson. And when I became a stand-up comedian, I was backstage at a concert in L.A., and a guy who works for the company Dunlop was introducing me to all these music industry people backstage at this concert at the Universal Amphitheater. It was a Scorpions Dokken concert back in 2002, I want to say. And at one point he stopped and said, "Oh, dude, I'm going to introduce you to this guy over here. And this guy lives with one of the biggest rock stars on the planet, but don't tell him I told you that." And we walked over and he says, "Hey, Maddie. Hey, man, I don't know if you're a fan of stand-up comedy or this TV show or that TV show, but this is Craig Gass. He's a stand-up comedian." And this guy, Maddie, turns around and goes, "Dude, I am your biggest fan." And I said, "Oh, no way." So we start talking, and we make plans to go bowling. And he brought Eddie Van Halen with him to the bowling alley. And come to find out that he is Eddie Van Halen's assistant. He lives on Eddie Van Halen's property.
Paint the picture, because a couple of people have talked about this property. And when I was out in L.A., I actually stalked the mailbox and went over there on Coldwater Canyon. And it's this drive that goes down into this abyss. But down there are a couple of estates plus like a little office building that happens to be the studio.
Yeah, there's the original house that Eddie moved into with Valerie decades ago. And next to it is what looks like an apartment building, and that's the 5150 Studios. And then he bought the property next door and demolished the house that was there, regraded the earth, and built a mansion and a guest house. And Eddie lives in the mansion, and Maddie lives in the guest house. And so over the course of the next year and a half, I end up going over there to hang out with Maddie and spend time with him. And Eddie would always be around. And when I got out of a really bad relationship, Eddie told me I should move in with him.
Yes, because this is how this was the crazy thing. Whenever I tell this story on behalf of you're out there touring, you're living with this girl in LA, you're out there touring, you come home, you have like 4 days, and then you got to get back on the road, and you break up with her, and she's like, "You need to find an apartment." And you're like, I can't find an apartment in 4 days, and I got to hit the road. So you tell Maddie this story, and Eddie happens to be there, and Eddie actually says, "Why don't you just move in here for a while?"
Yeah, with the greatest words that I've ever heard. He said, "Dude," and he's always smoking. He goes, "Dude, pack up your stuff and move in with me." And I said, "Is that okay?" And he said, "Yeah, dude." He goes, "You can sleep in the recording studio. Just, the only thing is, the band's getting back together, so it's going to be noisy at night." And I said, "So the only thing I have to worry about is the fact that Van Halen's going to be playing in the next room? And he said, well, he goes, I know you're working on your TV show, because I had just started filming a brand new TV show called Las Vegas for NBC.
Right.
So for the next couple of weeks, I am on a set every day telling jokes to James Caan and Alec Baldwin. And every night I go home up into the Hollywood Hills, and Eddie would be in the next room playing guitar and recording music. And I would knock on the door and say, hey, man, I just got home. Do you mind if I listen for a little bit before I go to bed? And every night he'd have a cigarette in his mouth and he'd go, dude, come on in. I'm lonely. And I would sit in and listen to him play guitar. It was a really surreal time in my life.
That is the most surreal story I've ever heard, because who wasn't a Van Halen fan? And then to be standing there, or sitting. There was one point where you told me I had a couple of beers in me and I started getting all cocky and I started requesting songs. That is insane.
Well, it wasn't. It was a conversation that he took as a request. So at the time, this is early 2004, they are putting together a new album, which is going to be a best of album with 2 new tracks. So Sammy and Michael were coming over to the house to record their parts for these new tracks. And so Eddie every night we'd end up talking about relationships, because he had just gotten out of a relationship with a girl. I had just gotten out of a relationship with a girl, and we would commiserate. And then in the middle of a conversation one night, he said, hang on a second, I just got to record this real quick. And he pushed his record, and he started playing his guitar and played a guitar solo. And then when he got done, I said, it's crazy, man. Like, I've been to so many Van Halen concerts, and my favorite moment of every Van Halen show I went to was in the middle of your solo when you would play a thing called Cathedral. And he said, oh, dude, sit down. And I said, no, I'm not requesting that. And he goes, no, Craig, sit down. And I said, no, Ed, I'm not asking you to play it. That wasn't, and he goes, no, Craig, sit down. And I sat down, and he played a 5-minute version of Cathedral for me. And it was surreal.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're lucky to have had that relationship with one of the greatest guitarists of all time.
Yeah, it ended on the worst note possible. Not from Eddie. I found out a year later that my ex, the whole reason I had moved into Eddie's house was to get away from this ex. And a year later, that ex texted me and said, I'm in love with Maddie, which was the name of Eddie's, which was the name of Eddie's assistant. And giving her benefit of the doubt, I texted her back and said, Maddie who? And she said, she gave me this whole long explanation about Maddie feels bad because he loves you. And then come to find out that every time I would leave L.A. to go do shows, Maddie, Eddie's assistant, would invite my ex over to the house.
Oh,
and
no.
then when I would come home, he would actually look me in the face and say, are you okay? Are you doing all right? Because he knew I was heartbroken. And he was banging my ex. They ended up together for 5 years. They almost got married.
What,
and
what would Sam Kinison say about this?
I think he would say that if there's one thing you learn about friendship, it's not to be a dick. Oh! Yeah. It was so ridiculous.
You have the weirdest, oddest stories. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Craig Gass, I appreciate you sharing those. Of course, how can people find you? You might as well plug yourself, because Craig does a full stand-up routine. If you don't know, and you've been through Atlanta plenty of times, does a full stand-up routine, and at the end, like the last 5 minutes, he does his voices, which, I mean, the Lars voice, the Tom Arnold voice, the Tracy Morgan voice, obviously the Gene Simmons. People love to hear those. But if people want to check more out about you, where do they find you?
Actually, you know what? Instead of plugging something, can I just leave you with a great Van Halen story?
Yes.
I remember one late night, Eddie talking about his son, who he loved dearly. And Eddie, there was a track on the album. The code to get into the recording studio was 0316, which I knew that code because it was a track on an album for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And 0316 was a guitar piece that Eddie started playing when Valerie was pregnant with Wolfie. He would put an acoustic guitar on Valerie's belly whenever Wolfie would kick, and he would play this guitar piece, this acoustic guitar piece, which would make Wolfie calm down. And Eddie told me that at that time when I was at the house, which is 2004, that a couple years earlier that Wolfie had said to him, "Hey, Dad, I want to learn how to play guitar." And Eddie Van Halen said, "Oh, okay. Well, let me see if I can find somebody." And he said, "I want you to teach me." And he goes, "Oh, okay." Like he didn't. And Eddie Van Halen, the greatest guitarist of our time, was like, "I'll try to find a professional." And his son is like, "No, I want you to teach me. You're the greatest guitar player of all time." So he teaches his son how to play guitar. What he doesn't know is that his son is secretly learning that acoustic piece. And he said his son was in a talent show, and he went down to watch his son play. And when his son walked out, he said, "Hi, my name's Wolfgang, and I'm going to play a guitar piece that my dad wrote. This is something that he would play on my mom's belly to calm me down. This is called 0316. And he started playing it. And Eddie said, "I'm filming it, and there's just tears pouring down my face. Come to find out, 0316 is Wolfie's birthday." So that is where the track for that song came. And he really, really loved his son and talked about him all the time, was really proud of him. So anyways, I just wanted to leave you with that story. And if you can, I think you should play that piece so people can hear it.
Let me press play right now, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Thank you, brother.